Hello chess friends and welcome to Azadov's chess channel and welcome to the Clutch Chess International Tournament in 2020. So again a great tournament in which Magnus Carlsen is also participating. It will be I think a very nice opportunity for him to redeem himself a little bit after this shocking loss against Hikaru Nakamura in the semifinals of the Lindoris Abbey Rapid Challenge. So it's again a different tournament because basically not every game every one game is evaluated 1 point. Basically, it's sort of a quarterfinal stage already, so 8 players are playing in the quarterfinal stage, and then in this quarterfinal stage, every player will play 12 games against his opponent. Then the first 4 matches, the first 4 games are evaluated 1 point. So if you want to win a game, then you get 1 point. But the fifth and the sixth games are evaluated 2 points. So maybe you can have 4 wins in the first 4 rounds, but then your opponent wins the next 2 games, and again the result is equal. So then the seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th game are again evaluated for 1 point, but then the 11th and 12th game are evaluated 3 points. So it gives really great opportunities for players that are maybe behind to get somehow back into the game. So we'll see how players will handle pressure. I think the pressure factor is a huge one here in this particular tournament, and I think again we'll have some great tactical battles because we'll have also this 10+5 time format, which is I think much better than this common classical time format. Basically, I really don't like this classical time format. I think it's sometimes boring. Maybe you have seen many tournaments which are starting with some 5 drawish games. So I think if the FIDE or some other organizations should really change the time format, because in this Lindoris Abbey Rapid Challenge and also in this Magnus Carlsen Invitational Tournament, I think the chess was simply better. We had so many great games, so many. The tournament was so dynamic. It was much better than the common, maybe I don't know, Lindoris Abbey classical time format tournament. So I think in order to maybe attract chess to more people, to more weak chess players, maybe to attract anyone in the world, I think the organizers of this chess tournament should really consider the option maybe to make maybe a rapid game sort of a classical time format, which could be, I think, very fun to watch for us, because as I said, sometimes, but really just sometimes, I think these classical time formats are boring. So okay, what to say about this Clutch Chess International Tournament? As I said, 8 players. Magnus Carlsen is playing, Levon Aronian is playing, which is also a great thing after his tragedy. I'm really happy for him that he's trying to get back on his feet. So we'll have, I think, again, great games. And today I wanted to show you the game between Magnus Carlsen against Jeffery Xiong. It was played again in this 10+5, as I said, and we have now we are already in the game 3. The first 2 games Magnus Carlsen won, so he has now 2 points. But that's not a losing match game immediately for Jeffery Xiong. As I said, if he wins maybe the 5th or the 6th game, then he gets 2 points, so he can still get back in the tournament. So it's really a great tournament for in which we can see how players will handle pressure. And as I said, now we're watching this game 3, which was, I think, really a great game, because we'll see also the so-called Canal Attack. The Canal Attack is really one of the best attacks if you have troubles to play against the Sicilian. Let's see now how Magnus Carlsen played this very nice opening. So here, knight to f3, we have c5 after e4. Now we have the Sicilian. It was a different move order, but still this is the common Sicilian setup. And we have now d6 and bishop to b5. This is the so-called Canal Attack. The main idea is already a great positional idea. And I hate when someone says, okay, what can we do in the first 2-3 moves? Nothing can happen in the first 4-5 moves. That's not true, because we can really tell so many things already about this position. After the move bishop to b5, here it's already sort of a positional idea by Magnus Carlsen. And Magnus Carlsen, as we know, is really a pragmatic player. He likes to simplify positions. After the move bishop to b5, here after the move bishop to d7, we have bishop takes, knight takes d7. And here I want you already to stop and evaluate the position. That's why I think this Canal Attack is really great, because if we evaluate the strength of these 2 bishops, you see black is already here sort of a pawn chain on dark squares, and in order to develop this Dark bishop black really has some troubles in the continuation of the game, so that's why this idea, this positional idea to play bishop to b5, giving up maybe the light square bishop, because the bishop on c8 had of course a great activity, so we traded a good piece for another good piece by our opponent, but basically we're continuing the game with the good bishop here by white, because white will always be able to play something like d3 or d4, but still have a good activity with this dark square bishop. On the other hand, even if black tries something like e6 or e5, still this bishop is blocked out by this central pawn structure, this central pawn chain. So as I said, I really hate when someone says, okay, we cannot talk so much about this position. Every position has really its dynamics, and every position has its own rules. So that's why here already a tricky idea in this Canal Attack, which is basically the common theory, but still I really like this opening. So here after castling, we have knight to f6 by Jeffery Xiong, we have rook to e1 by Carlsen, and rook to c8. Here Magnus tried c3 in order to get, of course, this pawn-centric control. And I've analyzed now this idea, if you try c4, which seemed to me maybe as a good black's idea, because we could maybe force sort of a backward pawn. We know that backward pawns are bad in the chess game, so if for instance white tries maybe something like d4, then we could play en passant c takes d4, maybe white will continue the game with a weak isolated pawn. But here b3 is white's possibility, that's why the c4 would be a mistake. And if there's something like e6, b takes c4, rook takes, and now d3, again basically white has accomplished the same thing. We have a nice powerful central control with our pawns. We can even try to improve the position of the pawn with the move d4 and maybe d5, maybe e5, so we would have really a nice flexible attack in the center. So in the game after the move c3, Xiong tried the move e6, trying to get some kind of an activity, because as I said, the bishop of blacks is a little bit blocked out, so we want to play d5 in order to liberate this diagonal. If you try g6 moves like here, it's not such a powerful idea to go maybe now into sort of a dragon setup, because still white can of course play the move d4 and will control the center. Still you haven't have weakened the pawn structure further, so that's why here Xiong tried e6, and we have now d4, c takes d4, and now after c takes d4, white has accomplished already this position, which we have the pawn central control. Our pawns are on the 4th rank, our opponent's pawns are on the 6th rank, so far we have the advantage of space. And here Xiong has to play, I think, the move d5, because if we play e5 in order to crack the position, then white will simply pass through with the move d5. And again, you have this bad bishop position in which the bishop is blocked out by its own pawn. It doesn't have good activity, so you could maybe find a way always for a knight into the game, but this bishop on f8 is simply bad. So that's why d5 had to be played. We have e5 by Magnus, knight to e4, and now knight to d2. We want, of course, to challenge the knight. We don't like pieces on our side of the board. That's not a good thing here for white, so that's why we need to kick away the piece, at least to trade it off, because there is now also maybe this positional threat of blacks to cement the knight with the move f5, really forcing white to give up his space advantage, because the main advantage that white has here in the game is of course this very nice advanced pawn on e5. And we have now, as I said, as I always like to mention in my analyzed games, we have the so-called directed attack. Again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself too much, but sometimes maybe a viewer will see my video for the first time, so I wanted to explain this directed pawn structure. It says, of course, that we are trying to attack now from white's perspective on the king side, because the pawns are aiming on that side. So we shouldn't touch basically something here on the queen side. Here we're trying at least to defend somehow. We should really not try to make many pawn moves. So we shouldn't weaken the pawn structure here on the queen side. We should basically coordinate our pieces on the king side and try to attack here. So in the game, knight takes d2 was played, queen to d2. Magnus is trying to get the queen into the game, queen to f4, queen to g5, waiting black to castle basically into white's attack. Here we have bishop to e7 and now queen to f4. Castling, we have queen to g4. Now the threat is of course to play bishop to h6. In order to prevent maybe a checkmate, you would be forced to play something like g6. So that's the main problem. You lose then the rook on f8. And f5 is not a possibility here, because we can simply take en passant, e takes f6, rook takes f6 is not so good, the rook would be vulnerable to your attacks. But if you take with another piece, then you lose your pawn on e6. So again, f5 so far not a possibility. So after the move queen to g4, we have rook to e8 and now h4. Very nice move by Magnus, immediately attacking the king side. As I said, we shouldn't wait, we shouldn't lose tempo, so you need to attack here. h4, h5, h6, splitting the pawns in front of the king, get some kind of an activity with this knight, with this bishop, maybe include even the rook into the game. Maybe here the possibility is to play rook to e3 or rook to g3. This could be also sort of an idea to get really a dynamic position here in front of black's king. In the game, queen to c7 was played by Xiong. He has, of course, now the advantage on the c file. That's basically the main advantage maybe that black has in the game, but it's really already a weird position here for black, because there are not so many defenders in front of black's king, because we have kicked away the knight with the move e5. So they are not good defenders, so basically black is only defending here. But the only way I think that black can win this game is to force this game into an endgame, in which maybe if we could just imagine a position in which everything is off the board and maybe black has the dark square bishop and also white has the dark square bishop, then I think black would have a comfortable game, as these two centralized pawns would be on dark square, so they could be maybe an object of black's bishop here. But still, this is really in long terms. Now you have to first get out of Magnus Carlsen's attack, and then you know what kind of an attacker really Magnus is. Here, after the move queen to c7, we have now bishop to h6, and maybe here a better idea is to play king to h8, simply get out of the attack. Bishop to b4 seemed to me at least some kind of a move which creates some kind of a counter-attack, but it's really weird that it's a bad move. Here you have immediately the possibility to play bishop to h6. After something like g6, we would have simply rook to c1. Here you, rook from e to c1. It's not a problem here, I think, for white to compete here on the c file anymore. And after something like rook to c1, bishop to h6, bishop to f8, attacking the bishop on h6 would be sort of an idea. But now bishop to g5, again, you're forcing the queen to retreat, and here after the move queen to b8, the problem is that black has lost the battle on the c file, which was basically black's main strategical advantage. So again, even in this position, it's not a good here position for black. So queen to c7 played by Xiong, not this move bishop to b4. You see, it is again not so powerful. It seemed to me that it could be really an idea of blacks here. In the game, bishop to h6 played by Carlsen. Now bishop g6, we have queen to f4. The main idea is now to play, of course, knight to g5, attacking the f7 weakness. And if black's bishop takes the pawn, takes the knight on g5, then we would have possibility to take bishop takes g5, and then, of course, the dark squares would be very, very vulnerable to white's attacks, because you simply are not allowed here to lose your dark square bishop, because the dark square bishop is also now the key protector of dark squares. If you lose your dark square bishop, this could be game over here for black. So that's why here queen to c2 played by Xiong, sort of counter attack, and we have now g4. So Magnus is, as I said, not losing any tempos. He's trying to attack, split the pawns in front of the king, and in the game b6 was played. If you try something like queen takes b2, it seems again like a dangerous move. Then you see what Magnus Carlsen has prepared here. Rook to b1, you can maybe grab another pawn, but now rook to b7 is really a dangerous threat. If you try queen to a4 in order to protect the knight, maybe then you get this very, very tricky idea, knight to g4. So you cannot cover with the rook, you lose simply material. You would be forced to give up your dark square bishop, but now the problem is you get h takes g5, not bishop to g5. This bishop is very well placed. What we want to do is simply kick away this knight and simply go queen to f6, queen to g7 checkmate. So maybe queen to c6 would be an idea, but now we can simply take, queen takes, and now after queen to f6, the game is over. You're gonna be checkmated. So that's why here after the move g4, so queen to b2 wasn't played in the game. In the game, b6 was played. Now Jeffery is threatening to play queen to b2, but now b3 played by Magnus, and now bishop to a3, which was really, I think, really a blunder now by Jeffery. It's simply losing tempos, and as I said, in this opposite side attack games, in this very dynamic games, you shouldn't lose any tempos. Bishop to a3, really unnecessary move. Queen to b2 maybe is a defensive idea in order to get this at least some kind of an attacker here. Rook to c2. After something like h5, white would probably in this position push the pawn further, but now rook to c2, and after rook to b1, it's not good to take the pawn here on a2. You would be forced to get the queen here on c3 to defend somehow, and here after knight to g5, now maybe we could take bishop to g5. After bishop to g5, at least we have protected now some queen to f6 ideas here, so this knight is not so endangered like in these positions before, in which we could maybe sacrifice the rook for the knight but then sneak in with the queen on f6. So now it's a new story in which I think black could maybe defend here, still with a bad position, but at least I think here you could maybe get out with even some f5 moves in order to simplify the position, because the problem for white here is you cannot take with the queen, or you cannot move the queen, because then you also leave your d4 pawn hanging. But that was only possible, as I said, after this potential move queen to b2. In the game, bishop to a3 was played by Xiong, and it was a mistake because Magnus played simply a very nice improvement of the position of the king. The king is not vulnerable to any attacks anymore. It's not a problem. Here queen to b2, and we have now knight to g5 attacking, and you are basically forced to play rook to e7. In the game, rook to d1 played by Magnus, and now finally rook to c2. But it's a little bit too late. You see how problematic this bishop to a3 idea was. You lost simply a very important tempo in the game. Rook to e3, we have rook to c3, and now h5. Simply pushing forward, we have queen to c2. If you try something like rook to e3, okay, you traded off the rooks, but if you try maybe to attack the rook to e1, basically black hasn't improved the position. It's really again a lost position sort of, because you could maybe try rook to e8 in order maybe to get this bishop somehow into the game, to maybe trade off it for this powerful bishop on h6. But now queen to f4, again, if you try rook to e7, there is this tactic, very, very dangerous, knight to h7 immediately. If you take king to h7, we have simply bishop to g5 attacking the rook. You cannot escape here on e8, then you lose simply your f7. You would be forced to play the move f6. And now after e takes f6 and rook to e8, rook to f7 is sort of an idea to block the position. But now simply rook takes e6, very, very dangerous. It's really a weird position. Now we could try h takes g6, queen to h2 attacking the king. Although down a piece, I think this is a winning game for white, because it's simply too much activity against black's king here. The bishop is basically too far away from the action, so again, not a favorable continuation here for black. So in the game, as I said, after the move h5, we have queen to c2, not this move rook takes e3. So here Jeffery tried queen to c2 in order to keep the position compact, to maybe include the queen somehow into the defense. But now Magnus played simply rook to c3, very important deflection move. Here after queen to c3, now again this idea knight takes h7. So after king takes h7, we have bishop to g5. This idea to play the move f6 doesn't work anymore. It's not the same position like before. Now we have immediately the opportunity to play bishop takes f6, so not e takes f6, so bishop takes f6 attacking the rook. And here if you try knight takes f6, we have first h takes g6 attacking the king. The problem is you cannot take, of course. We simply play queen to f6 and then also attacking the rook, include this rook into the game. So here after the move king to g8, queen to f6 is sort of a possibility. And if you try to maybe get the queen somehow back into the defense, then rook to h1 is winning immediately. You could try maybe rook to g7 in order to prevent this rook to h8 checkmate, but now queen to e6, you are forced to bring your king to f8, and now rook to h8, it's game over. So tricky stuff prepared here by Magnus. So after the move bishop to g5, Jeffery tried king to g8, escaping here, but now simply bishop takes Bishop takes e7, bishop takes e7, and now rook to c1, attacking the queen. Queen has to move to b4, and now you see this rook comes very, very active into the game. Rook to c8. You have only this move to protect you here. Knight to f8. If you try bishop to f8, it's even worse because you get simply h takes g6. After f takes g6, queen to h6 is sort of a threat. King to f7 doesn't work. You cannot escape from this. It's even checkmate because you get simply queen to h7. After bishop to g7, here queen to g8, and after king to e7, we have simply queen to e8 checkmate. So in this position, you would be forced here to play something like maybe to simplify the position somehow. Maybe try to get some other defenders into the game, but it's not so easy. You could maybe try queen to b5, but again, queen to g6. I'm not seeing a good way how to defend queen to g6 after king to h8. We can again play another check, and again simply queen takes e6, king to h7 maybe, but now rook to c7, simply attacking this knight. It's really, really bad position for black. It's game over here. So as I said, knight to f8, bishop to f8, the same problems are happening here. We have again h6 here now by Magnus Carlsen. The idea is of course to play h7 because you cannot capture with the knight, then deflect the king from the defense of f7 and simply take this weak pawn. So that's why here g5 was played. We have this move h7, we have g7, and now simply h8, the promotion, king takes, and now queen to f7. It's game over. You cannot protect everything in the game. And Jeffery tried queen to d4. Magnus simply traded off more pieces. And now after king to h7, we have queen to f7. We have king to h8. But now, very nice move, queen to h5. Again, taking a pawn with the check, which is very important. It gives you another tempo. After king to h7, we have queen to e7, king to h8, and now queen to f6. And here, finally, Magnus Carlsen takes another pawn. We have now really a winning position. 3 pass pawns, 3 connected pass pawns. And the problem is there are now no good checks here. Even if you try queen to e4, you cannot do perpetual. So here, queen to d1, we have queen to f5, king to g8, and now e6. In this position, Jeffery Xiong resigned. So no more checks are possible here against white king. We can simply push further. Even if black's defend somehow, we could go into a simplification line in which we simply trade off the queens and go after this pawn. Still, these pawns cannot be catched by the king. So as I said, in this position, Jeffery resigned. So after the first 3 rounds, Magnus Carlsen had a perfect result, 3-0. But it doesn't mean anything in this tournament. As I said, if Jeffery Xiong, for instance, wins these last 2 games, he has 6 points, which is really an incredible thing in this tournament. There are many ways how to win a match game, so we'll see what will happen in the continuation of the tournament. So far, it has been really great. Magnus had a lost position, I think, in the first game, got out of with some tactical skills again. It will be again, I think, a great tournament, and we'll have a great week. It will last for one week. Again, I think I'll sleep on the couch because my wife won't probably be happy because I'm covering this tournament. But okay, I'll try to cover as many of these games as I can. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games that I've analyzed so far. Here's the link from some other tournaments that have been played so far, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.